Okay, this was interesting. So, Nikole Hannah Jones, who is the sort of thinker behind the 1619 Project at the New York Times, become very famous for this, got into an exchange online that was pretty head-scratching and, again, fairly caricaturish of the particular political view that she represents. So let's go ahead and put this tweet up on the screen. So this is in an online debate about tipping and whether you should just, and this was actually started by my friend Torre, and I'll get to that in a minute, and about whether you should just like baseline, you always tip 20% or 30%, really kind of no matter what the service is. And this sparked a heated debate. And so Nikole Hannah Jones jumps in here to add this to the conversation. Tipping is a legacy of slavery, and if it's not optional, then it shouldn't be a tip, but simply included in the bill. Have you ever stopped to think why we tip? Like why tipping is a practice in the U.S. and almost nowhere else? After slavery, forcing Black people to work service jobs for tips was a way for white employers not to pay for Black labor. Now waiters remain the employees today who earn less than minimum wage. The shame for tipping is on the government and employers, but not on the customer. I tip, and if I don't, I leave a note as to why. But telling Black people that we should tip regardless of quality of service when we know we too often do not get high quality service is asinine to me. So Edward Nweso Jr. says here, is she saying not tipping is a form of anti-racism? This has to be some of the most lib shit I have ever heard in my life. Your thoughts, Kyle?
When she says, I tip, but if I don't, that means she doesn't tip.
Yeah.
That's what that means. There is no, I tip, but if I don't. What do you mean, but if you don't? I've never not tipped in my life. Anybody who there's even a small chance I'm supposed to tip, I tip.
And she leaves them a note? Is it on like the historical roots of tipping?
Can you imagine?
You're
you work for less than minimum wage and you're serving her and, you know, you're trying your best and you're also trying to pay the bills and keep the lights on and all that stuff, take care of your kids, whatever it might be. And then you not only do you not get a tip, you get like lectured about the history
you get a
of this
note
and why you should be thankful that you weren't tipped and that this is part of a legacy of slavery. And so,
right, that it's actually really righteous that she's not tipping because this is taking a stand against the legacy of slavery.
So this strikes me, it's just an excuse to be a non-tipper or a shitty tipper. That's how I read it. Now maybe I'm doing too much psychoanalysis here and reading too deeply into it, but that's definitely my interpretation of what she was saying.
It's very simple. If you don't tip, you're an asshole. Like, you can't wrap it in some, like, anti-racist political project.
Some fake virtuousness.
Yeah, fake virtuousness. And I think, actually, Edward's comment there that it's the most lib shit ever, I think is also really appropriate because it speaks to the type of liberal who is more interested in their personal actions and virtuousness than in any sort of, like, broader project. Because, look, I also think that the structure of forcing people to like dance and perform for you in order to get a tip and have a living wage is an absurd system. I think that everyone should earn a living wage, period. But that's not like a project for me to personally engage in or protest against by not tipping and screwing over the very people that you're supposedly most concerned about. So it's this weird attempt to like virtue signal your way out of being an asshole by just not tipping the disproportionately Black and brown servers who you don't feel have performed to your standards.
And that's the key point. She could have said that, but she didn't say that. She could have made the point, look, right now this is the system that we have, so I have to tip because it's the right thing to do and people, you know, deserve the money, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, the entire tipping system is total bullshit and we need to tear it down and we need a law that's a no exception to the minimum wage law where nobody makes the whatever it is, $3 and however many cents and then you get tips on top of that. And so everybody needs to get paid a living wage. That should be our project. That should be what we're fighting for, et cetera, et cetera. She could have said that. She didn't say that. She didn't say that at all. There was none of that in there. It was just like, I tip, but if I don't, it's because slavery happened.
I leave a note about the roots of tipping and slavery because I'm sure that's really helpful to the person who is trying to serve you. So I noticed when this was shared that it was my friend Torre who had sparked this conversation. So I talked to him a little bit about it yesterday and Touré is very mischievous and he's kind of a shit disturber. And he said that every few years he'll bring up this topic of tipping because it really gets people going, which is kind of an interesting
So what does he say? What did he
insight.
tweet?
So his tweet that sparked this whole conversation was, if you go to a restaurant and you get served, you should tip 20%, period. If you get bad service, then speak to the manager. Don't dock the tip and walk out without saying what went wrong. That's whack, which I agree with.
I even go a step further. I won't even complain if it's bad service. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Just tip and walk out. That's it.
And here's the other thing is a lot of times it's oftentimes not the server's fault. Like there could be a fuck up in the kitchen. It could be really busy. They could have been overbooked. It's a very difficult job. And the other thing, and Touré made this point to me as well, he's like, I just haven't had this experience that apparently other people are routinely having of quote unquote bad service where it's so bad that you're like, I'm not even going to leave a tip.
Even if it is, I don't care. I'm still going to tip.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Right.
Like their livelihood depends on this shit.
Agreed.
They could have a bad day. They could have figured out their dog died, their mom died. Like, who gives a fuck? Who cares?
Yeah.
Just fucking tip.
But his point is basically like that this epidemic of bad service is really just an excuse for people to be cheap assholes.
That's probably true.
It's not really a major problem. Most servers are doing their damnedest because they rely on tips and they want to do well. And so he's saying that this whole narrative of there's a massive problem with bad service and people who are just lazy and don't want to do their job is also kind of fabricated and just an excuse for people to be assholes.
People also, though, might not have that much money, so it's hard for them to tip a lot. You know what I'm saying? That's also a thing that probably exists. But then you come full circle back to your original point of like, let's just have a system where everybody makes a fucking living wage. Yeah, it's not that difficult.
Yes, indeed. So there you go. But yeah, apparently conversations about tipping are highly fraught and controversial, and people have very, very hard opinions on it.
I did not. It was out of left field. This is from a legacy of slavery thing. And by the way, this will be maybe my most controversial point. Even if that's true, I don't care. Fucking tip.
Right.
Just fucking tip.
Of course.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
because you're not fighting that legacy of slavery by screwing over the people that are most screwed over by the system. Like
exactly.
You're just making things worse. And your note about how this is anti-racist, your non-tipping is silly.